Yahusha ate, and Yahuah said to Yahusha, "Do not be afraid nor be discouraged. Take all the soldiers with you, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, and his people, and his city, and his land. So you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Yereku and its king. Only its spoil and its livestock you take as plunder for yourselves. Set for yourselves an ambush for the city behind it." And Yahusha and all the soldiers rose up to go up to Ai. And Yahusha chose 30,000 mighty brave men and sent them away by night and commanded them, saying, "See, you are going to lie in ambush against the city, behind the city. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you shall be prepared, while I and all the people who are with me approach the city. And it shall be, when they come out against us, as formerly, that we shall flee before them, and they shall come out after us, till we have drawn them from the city, as though saying, They are fleeing before us as formerly. And we shall flee before them. Then you shall rise from the ambush and seize the city, and Yahuah your Elohim shall give it into your hand. And it shall be, when you capture the city, that you burn the city with fire. Do according to the word of Yahuah. See, I have commanded you." And Yahusha sent them out. And they went to lie in ambush, and stayed between Beital and Ai, on the west side of Ai. But Yahusha stayed that Lila in the midst of the people. And Yahusha rose up early in the morning, and inspected the people, and went up, he and the elders of Yisharal, before the people to Ai. And all the soldiers who were with him went up and drew near, and came before the city and camped on the north side of Ai, with the valley between them and Ai. And he took about 5,000 men, and set them in ambush between Beital and Ai, on the west side of the city. So they stationed the people, all the army that was on the north of the city, and its rear guard on the west of the city. And Yahusha went that Lila into the midst of the valley. And it came to be, when the king of Ai saw it, that the men of the city hastened and rose up early, and went out against Yisharal to battle, he and all his people, at an appointed place before the desert plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Yahusha and all Yisharal let themselves be beaten before them, and fled by the way of the wilderness. And all the people who were in Ai were called together to pursue them, and they pursued Yahusha, and were drawn away from the city. So there was not a man left in Ai or Beital who did not go out after Yisharal, and they left the city open and pursued Yisharal. And Yahuah said to Yahusha, "Stretch out the spear that is in your hand toward Ai, for I give it into your hand." And Yahusha stretched out the spear that he had in his hand toward the city. And the ambush rose up quickly from their place. And they ran at the stretching out of his hand, and entered the city, and took it, and hastened to burn the city with fire. And the men of Ai looked behind them, and saw the smoke of the city rising to the heavens. And there was no power in them to flee this way or that way, for the people who had fled to the wilderness turned back on the pursuers. For when Yahusha and all Yisharal saw that the ambush had captured the city, and that the smoke of the city went up, they turned back and smote the men of Ai. The others also came out of the city against them, so they were in the midst of Yisharal, some on this side and some on that side, and they smote them until none were left, and none had escaped. But the king of Ai they caught alive, and brought him to Yahusha. And it came to be, when Yisharal ended slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field, in the wilderness where they pursued them, and when they all had fallen by the edge of the sword until they were consumed, that all the Yisharalites returned to Ai, and smote it with the edge of the sword. And it came to be, that all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000 all men of Ai. And Yahusha did not draw back his hand, with which he stretched out the spear, until he had put all the inhabitants of Ai under the ban. Only the livestock and the spoil of that city Yisharal took as booty for themselves, according to the word of Yahuah which he had commanded Yahusha. And Yahusha burned Ai, and made it a heap forever, a ruin to this Yom. And he hanged the king of Ai on a tree until evening. And at sunset, Yahusha commanded that they should take his corpse down from the tree and throw it at the entrance of the gate of the city, and raise over it a great heap of stones to this day. And Yahusha built an altar to Yahuah Elohim of Yisharal in Mount Ebal, as Musha, the servant of Yahuah, had commanded the children of Yisharal, as it is written in the book of the Torah of Musha, an altar of unhewn stones over which no man has wielded iron. And they offered on it burnt offerings to Yahuah and slaughtered peace offerings. And there, in the presence of the children of Yisharal, he wrote on the stones a copy of the Torah of Musha, which he had written. And all Yisharal, the sojourner as well as the native, with their elders and officers and judges, stood on either side of the ark before the priests, the looming, who bore the ark of the covenant of Yahuah. Half of them were in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Musha, the servant of Yahuah, had commanded before, that they should bless the people of Yisharal. And afterward he read all the words of the Torah, the blessings and the cursings, according to all that is written in the book of the Torah. There was not a word of all that Musha had commanded which Yahusha did not read before all the assembly of Yisharal, with the women and the little ones and the sojourners who accompanied them.